Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing story coming to us from the US. We have Kenneth Hopkins on board today. Kenneth, for most of his life, had no awareness that he was an abductee. The night experiences he thought were just dreams. And these, he would visit many places and see the same people many nights after he fell asleep. He thought they were dream people. He could smell them, touch them, and use all of his six senses with them. Some places were cold, some places warm, and other places he couldn't seem to get enough oxygen in. Things became strange in the summer of 1976 while attending Northeastern University. He would get a top security job working for a contracting agency for the Department of Defense. The DoD and an abduction would create a conflict that would become lifelong in surveillance. From 1975 through 1978, he would be abducted by the Greys in the daytime while driving a car with numerous different young women. These experiences he would have no memory of. He called them blackouts. He would later become aware that these were referred to as missing time. As they occurred, he felt helpless. Some ranged from half an hour to most of a day. Always, there were women present. In 30 minutes to an hour, most of the women seemed unaware. These incidents occurred in cars, at beaches, and even amongst crowds of people. As events occurred, so did homicides of witnesses. He ran into the Navy when men in suits started looking for him. In the last two homicides, two people just disappeared. Surveillance would start while he was in the U.S. Navy and continues to this day. In 2003, after telling a story of seeing a UFO to his son, he would start getting flashbacks. They became traumatic. He would begin his search with hypnosis and Massachusetts move on. These pieces would come together in fragments of what occurred some 35 years ago. He would become horrified as different visitors came into his room, awakening him, some ghosts and some interdimensionals. It was at this point he reached out and helped others understand their experiences. His story was published in 2016 in a book named Earth Transformations. With much assistance from Lan Starkweather, they were able to get this book published. Unfortunately, the book had been taken out of circulation. So, Kenneth, thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate the opportunity.
So, Ken, when did everything start off for you?
The pre-birth embryo implant would probably be the first part. And then as a child, and no awareness of time, I wasn't aware of the experiences with the Greys. There was an occasion where they took me away from my family for 2 days because of lack of supervision during childcare. They have basically been with me both in my mind into adulthood. As a child, I didn't understand the voices in my mind. I didn't realize they were connected. As I realized they were connected, I became scared when they started playing and affecting my outside reality. What I'm currently looking at in my research is the economic political structures of the celestials. The Pleiadians have kind of asked me to pursue this, and they've given me their perspective quite clearly. The photographing of plasma teleportation was published in my first book, and with the high electrical exchange that's occurring, matter is turning into energy, leaves the room as energy, comes into another dimension as energy, and then we form in other places. Initially, I was forming inside the ships of the Pleiadians. The alternate personalities play quite a role because many of my experiences were too fragmented to put together and understand. Currently, I've done a lot of, or am going back into hypnosis. I've done extensive years with hypnosis to understand the interactions of the different personalities. We're working on something now to bring the personalities together, which will bring more and fuller awareness.
So, yeah, you talked about embryo. So you said earlier before the show that your birth mother was impregnated. So let's get into that.
Yeah, that was actually a confusing mess because my mother was choosing to have a child with my great uncle. For some reason, the military seemed to think in my initial contacts with them that my father was this great uncle. And this great uncle spent much time with me spiritually in seances and so forth. But what we later found out, he was German. We later found out, and I really didn't look at the records that were done with the genetic program. But my son reviewed them. And when I was telling my mother I was half German, my son corrected me saying, no, you're half Scandinavian. And then I said, how the hell am I half? So my son had read it. I had checked to see if my father was my father. I never had questioned to check to see if my mother was my mother. So my son brought that to my awareness about 8 months ago. So that seems to play a role. The Greys, the Pleiadians say I was born into them, so I assume the Scandinavian was connected to the. So they put together my father's genes and the Scandinavian's genes, and then Greys tell me she was not yet born. So this could be connected to time travel experiences. There's so much I don't know about the whys. I can tell you what's happening, but I don't know the reasons as to why things are happening.
So the Greys told you this face to face?
No, all communication is telepathic, and anybody with any level of connection with the ETs need to get that telepathic communication going. Okay. And then that'll bring them much closer to understanding. You reach out, they reach back. It's usually very simple. And then the classes I had with the Pleiadians, they were teaching me alternative sciences and physics. They basically consider what's taught here as garbage and waste. And they, when I was going to college in engineering, my courses were sabotaged. Test papers disappeared. They did not want me getting my engineer degree because they thought that these were wasted sciences, and they thought it would interfere with the science they taught me in the nights. But in these courses, we were not given conscious memory. We remember before the class, we remember after the class. We do not remember the class. But where I'm going into with through psychotherapy, we're working to bring all these personalities together, all these awarenesses together, so that the memories of the experiences with the celestials are much clearer.
Okay. Now you said as a kid, you'd have these voices in your head. Growing up back in in the 70s and 80s, we would have been brought directly to like a psychiatrist and on pills. But how did you talk about this to your mom?
No. But the voices were very supportive. My early years, like many contactees of my age group, were hit with abuse, traumatic abuse, and these somehow seem to be related or connected to dissociation and multi-personalities involved in abductions. But exactly how, I don't know. I also stepped into the MK Ultra project, Boston Children's Hospital, unknowingly trying to get assistance in learning. The trauma to my head brought on seizures. My mother was knocking me into unconsciousness. So my growing up was very depressing, staying back twice, starting school late. So it was a very rough emotional time. And I have to say, the Pleiadian, or I'm not sure, it may have been the Greys, but they were always into giving me a good perspective of myself, not looking at the traumas that were going on. I was angry at them because they didn't interfere with the traumas. They would mend me after the traumas. And so it seemed like there was a conscious effort not to remember them because they weren't helping me any. And that was kind of rule I did with a lot of things. If it's not going to help, don't waste your time with it. Don't waste your time with negative thoughts. I spent 70 years wasting my time on negative thoughts. The hungry ghosts is what the Buddhists refer to the men, and they're going to constantly bring you down. And there's no reality in the negativity they present in your heads. But anyways, that was just a thought.
Did they ever show up physically in your bedroom? Because, you know, a lot of...
Yeah, there was one, for the most, in the early years of the Pleiadians, we became very close. We sexually interacted. Sexual interactions were quite different than as a child on Earth. There was a stronger spiritual material connection. The ETs, you feel their energy. Mm. We're so inhibited, this energy isn't projecting from us. So you can feel that they're good, despite what their features are. It's the sensation that comes with them. Most of my experiences have been very positive beings. And they've been very warm in the energies they put out. And this, of course, was inclusive in the early loves. Then there were the hybrid programs where it was just to impregnate the woman. There wasn't supposed to be sensitivity. There wasn't supposed to be an emotional connection. And I was doing things that were with looking for the emotional connection in those that cause some conflict. But they basically, many of those women would have me meet them later on and their children. And some were of Earth, and I really don't know where some of the others were of. As you say, the Pleiadians is a large system. So as far as the specifics, the ones I am communicating with are from the future. They're about preventing what happens. So they talk about us to a past of events that hasn't yet occurred. And so that's how they've related to me. The grays are of the future. The grays are also connected with grays of the present. They're very, very protective of their contactees. They can defer death. They can change time and distort distances with preventing deaths. And I've read listened and interviewed on many of these experiences where, and I had about 3 where I should have died, impacting into a 18-wheeler with a motorcycle, a car. For some reason, 18-wheelers were in my way. So I should have died in a number of those interactions. But suddenly I'd be somewhere else. As I'm looking at dying, I'd be somewhere else in a car. And so I know time was distorted. Time and space was distorted in those. And many gray contactees have talked of this. The grays provide protection to their beings. And they're not the only group. A number of the groups provide protection to their beings. I've heard of interactions in Ukraine where a regiment was destroyed because it threatened the existence of one of theirs. A lot of the information, of course, I get isn't available. I interact with many contactees, and so a lot of information I have access to is somewhat not reported. The Pleiadians and the Reptilians, Draconians have conflict. One is into making and producing servitude. The other is into free mental and spiritual development. And the Reptilians currently have a strong hold, which my understanding is being loosened. So that conflict. The Greys and the Pleiadians have a history of nuclear war. But they've come together in many ways. The Pleiadians had problems with the non-emotional aspects of the Greys' abductions, especially the ones I described. The ones I describe in my book are horrifying, terrifying, and the woman will wake up not remembering. But when we enter into these memories, they're very traumatic. And the Greys are somewhat distant on this emotional exchange. The Greys were dying as a genetic species, and they had to reinstitute. And I was amazed how the human and the Greys came together genetically. It was phenomenal. But there was many deaths in that process. So the Greys are trying to bring on and allow their own reproduction in using the humans. The Greys are probably the closest to me as far as trust. The Greys have divided the world into two places: those that serve us, that serve one another, those that serve themselves. And the Greys are interested in the ones that serve one another. As I mentioned in the Pleiadian philosophy, the creator is within us. To serve the creator, we love one another. And that in turn, the creator serves us. So that was just...
Well, it's a good concept, really.
Yeah, the economics, the profits, that whole concept is removed. When you go to the power of one, you create separation. And that's what this dimension has done.
Okay. So you had these contacts growing up. Anything happened to you during high school?
Not that I was aware of. Or the Pleiadians were pretty much with me, but I thought they were dreams. And when I was doing the classes, I said, "Mother, why do you always end up in the classes in my pajamas?"
Yeah.
And my mother said, "You're dreaming. It's about inadequacy." But anyways, so I went to the classes since the age of 5 or 6, I think, when I remember them.
So what were you shown during those classes?
I don't have conscious memory because we have awareness before the class and we have awareness after, and some during the classes. We were taught their medical procedures. Yeah. We were taught heavily on their physics and their mathematics system. And that's why they did not want me going into engineering. So they were actually stealing the papers from the professors. They were sabotaging my marks at Greenfield Community College in Massachusetts. Yeah. So eventually I was suspended because repeating a course they disrupted. I had 2 Fs in the same course and I got suspended, and the military was paying for this. So I learned a lot about man's sciences, and in time I expect to have conscious memory of what they taught in those classes.
Could you describe the Pleiadians that you saw? Because there's a lot of groups, it seems. So yeah, it's a bit confusing.
Yeah, they pretty much look like us. Sometimes I equated their dress to the 40s and 50s. They're usually very attractive. They spiritually projected much stronger than humans do. You can feel more of their essence. You can feel if they're of harm or of good. But in 99% of my cases, it was good. And I've never seen old, which I don't understand. I've seen young, but there seems to be an age group I don't see beyond. And of course, I'm with them at 70. Like an old man with them, the way I look at it. But they're usually very attractive, good figures. The Greys, of course, there's kind of like 3 different Greys that work together, or 3 that come in that group. Some are more technical. The smaller ones are more assisting, lift. They're not as technical. And my visual recollections of the Greys in hypnosis is somewhat distorted. For some reasons, the faces are always blurred out. But I have much trust in them. They're incredibly an objective group. I think from the source in Germany, they've completed enough ships for Earth's evacuation, which I think will occur. And I think man in return will be returned back to Earth. So I think the current structure we see, I think we'll see fall apart. And truth, of course, is the way to dismantle it.
Yeah. Okay. Now, let's say regarding their technology, have you seen anything regarding that?
Well, the teleportation, being sent from one place in a split second, did a job on my mind. I had difficult accepting, and I think that may have caused some fragmentation. There's no sense, there's no sensation. It's just instantaneously you're somewhere else. On photographs, you become an incredibly bright light before you disappear. I think I sent you some photographs, I'm not sure. So that process is definitely an advanced technology. It includes time travel, distance, and universe. With that travel, I visited planets. With that travel, I visited people on ships, visited people in other countries, visited people in other states. And that travel continues. The Pleiadians world, I haven't fully put it together to fully function in it. They are not Christian oriented. As I explained, they believe in the creator. So their ships with gravity and communities living on them are very advanced technologically. It's like a town living on a ship. Those are where my abductions were 30, 40 years ago. Now they seem to be in different places of the country.
Okay. So,
and with normal people.
So okay, so this happened a long time ago, but how did they come to you in the bedroom? Like you
yeah, in the breeding project, often I'm assuming my wife disappeared. I was drugged. They're basically looking for the sperm. And there seemed, I don't know if it had to do with the interdimensional travel, but they blitzed my mind. So that I felt spacey and I couldn't focus. One of them wanted a relationship with me. And we went into several places until she decided to visit me in my bedroom. As she walked away from me in my bedroom, clarity came. So the energies seemed to affect, orgasms were easy with her.
Yeah.
Orgasms were easy with most of them, except when you're woken at 3 a.m., you're certainly not going to be in a mood with that. So they use a drug or a gas that induces the ejaculation of sperm into the women. And for a lot of the women, it may have felt like a sexual assault. This is the Pleiadians interbreeding. Also, they interbreed people on Earth with each other. So it's quite an encompassing program. Also, we may breed with people of their planet, on their planet.
Okay. Have you ever like seen UFOs up close?
Strangely enough, I've had very few sightings of UFOs, but under hypnosis, I got a lot of the gray ships that somehow seem smaller on the outside than they were in the inside, which I have no explanation for. They would land in front of the car. I was into this thing of, I liked a certain level of privacy when you're in a car drinking a beer with a woman. So I had a tendency to pick dirt roads out in the middle of nowhere, which was perfect for the grays. They can take me, bring me back after 45 minutes. The woman's been inseminated, and then I end up late on a curfew with the family. So that was going on in the mid 70s, 75, 76, 78. And the military witnessed the Department of Defense intelligence during a top secret security clearance were following me, and they would witness an abduction. So they in turn questioned both me and the girl, and both of us felt that we had gone to a movie and watched a movie. When they asked us for the details on the movie, we had no details on the movie. I believe they said something to the girl because I never saw her again. She'd never answer my calls. They never said anything to me, so I had no idea. But what happened in the abduction they witnessed is another personality took over. That personality locked them in their cars because he felt they were going to interfere with the abduction. So that became where they hired a young woman from the MK Ultra projects with a cerebral implant to do surveillance on me. So they introduced her to me in the Department of Defense contract facility. And then the book takes off, and it's called UFO Girl. She's basically working with military intelligence and all the abductions that occur to her with the Greys and their attempt at removing of the implant in her head. I also in the book show a picture of another child participating in this project in a hospital, government hospital. So UFO Girl is about the abductions with her. And then in their darkness, 8, 9 other women are taken and evaluated by the Greys, but not all are used in the breeding project.
But how did they become aware that you were being taken by the Greys?
It was, I didn't. And I was having a problem at age 22 with the blackouts. So I was pretending they didn't happen, and then boom, 16 hours with the agent. And that was when the Greys she went through convulsions previous days, the most severe convulsions I've ever witnessed. And that's what these implants did. And then the Greys wanted to evaluate her. The personality that was involved with the Greys, not mine, had concern on the girl. So they took her apart to evaluate the implant in her head, brought me in after they disassembled her, asked me what I knew about the implant. And then that was the only conscious memory I really had. And so I picked her up at 10 a.m., 2 a.m. We come to driving a car. Always, they'd take you while you're driving a car. They'd return you, you'll be driving the car. So I don't understand what and how they did it. But with the cars, that was kind of the game that was going on.
So what was the purpose of, because you've got implants, I suppose.
There's a friend or an acquaintance who was familiar with both out of the UN, who was familiar with the ETs and the human implants, found 6. One of them, one of them is physically evaluates the body and the blood. If that goes wrong, it triggers intense pain. And that pain and that implant is here. She found that one. It's a fairly large one. So it basically creates enough pain so you go to a hospital. And then they'll usually they do blood tests and they'll pick up on what the disruption was about. The most recent was done last year, January of last year, in which they replaced the lung. That went real bad. I think I sent you pictures of that. They replaced a lung from a clone, and the lung not having the COVID immunity. I had been sick with COVID, so the body had the immunity, but the new lung being put into the body didn't have the immunity. So Omicron viral pneumonia set into that lung, and that would re-break the ribs that the ETs had taken apart to put the lung in. So I think I showed you a picture of 5 severed ribs that they put together, and there's a couple more ribs that have to. So that was an example of a project going wrong. But their medicine is smooth. They replaced my knees. They've replaced components of my head, my heart. And so for the most part, these go without, but many contactees are having procedures done to them. And so it's not unusual. And you can see the visible marks. So that created a year which I was pretty much disabled.
Oh my God. Ever woken up with scoop marks taken? You know, skin?
Yeah, I have. I have. It was. I photographed one. With me, there's a scoop mark, but an implant was put into that hole. I was in college, again, not knowing anything about the ETs. I woke up with a bed full of blood. It looked like there was a bullet hole in the back of my leg. And that scar is quite present. But what they had done is they put something that looked like a BB. And it eventually came out at some point, but it looks like a bullet hole. And that's on the back of my leg.
Oh my God.
So, and that was a confusing situation in which an agent disappeared. One of the surveillance agents disappeared in Belchertown, Massachusetts. And there was a lot of stuff going on, from police investigations to, and so the Greys are furious that the military had killed that man. And he was, my impression is he may have been federal. As I've had problems with both federal and the military, for the most part, protected. In my book, I write about how they prevent me from going to a meeting that I'm going to be tortured and killed at. So they're monitoring. They picked up things I'm not aware of. It's only in the recent years I've stopped fearing them. They put the lung in to disable me from going overseas a week before a trip to overseas because they were not comfortable in security. Then they wanted me to wear a bulletproof vest. Eventually, they were fairly comfortable in security. So I went this year, but there was no need to replace the lung that they replaced. It was to prevent me from traveling overseas. And they didn't expect it would become infected with pneumonia. Right. And they didn't expect the ribs would require hospitalization at Mass General.
So you said that you're being watched by government officials, and you were so afraid that you fled to the Navy?
During the homicide, FDEA, 2 agents, and we don't know who the 3rd agent was. One was undercover, and for some reason they had interested in my case. And so they had me believing that a woman, and this is in the book, the UFO girl, they had reason believing that a girlfriend, to convince me that a girlfriend was in trouble. And they wanted me to assist the girlfriend at a house in New Hampshire. The military was monitoring through this whole thing. And so they sabotaged my car so I couldn't make the meeting. 3 men disappeared, bodies never found. And that was the end of that whole situation. So the military explained to me they had to track what the paperwork and everything behind why they were setting up to torture me. So again, so I went undercover with the FDEA when I was in the Navy to find out what happened to what I thought was 1 man. I'd later find out 3 men disappeared. They were interested where his body was.
So what did they do to the car? Did they bust your tires?
They did something so that the axle came out.
Okay.
So, but in turn, they sent somebody to the meeting. And that somebody was the alternate. And so they so they knew what was going on. But me at that time, if somebody told me they were from somewhere else, and the agents fooled me all the time. Like UFO girl, I never suspected was an agent. But I'd take people at what they say.
Yeah.
So when somebody gives me this information on somebody else, then he's that somebody else. So, but in that time, the surveillance protected my ass.
Okay.
Every call was being monitored at that time.
Now, did you ever get this physical evidence that you're being tracked? Because when
it's pretty obvious. They break into the house, they put the devices in the walls. They're monitoring this program we're doing. Vehicles, airplanes, it's pretty obvious. So there's no today I went to and from the bank, and they followed me to and from the bank with a car. So that's pretty prevalent. And my son's getting harassed by an airplane, a Piper, that was showing up at work and circles the house. The that airplane has been watching him for 2 years now, 2.5 years. At the farm he worked at, it would dive down at him. And he found it quite threatening. And we, of course, they sabotaged the boat because when they put an implant in my foot, they didn't want me in salt water. Basically, $2,000 damage to a 24-foot boat. Police were involved in that, and they told me why they sabotaged the boat. So they made it clear I was not to go into salt water, stay freshwater, because the implant is satellite trackable. I don't understand the military's tracking devices. I have a lot of them in me. I don't exactly understand how they work, but it feels like energy. There's these periods where it feels like energy is coming into you, and it seems to affect everybody in the house or everybody in the room. And it hit me and my wife in Uganda, and it's a very uncomfortable. She was sleeping through it, but she was moving all over the place rapidly as it hit us. And my body overheats, and that's connected to one of the implants. So satellite tracking, they're calling it. But I really don't understand anything of it. It's just very uncomfortable. It put my son out of work because they like to do late at night, and it disrupted his sleep schedule. Yeah. So they put 2 implants in my foot, put one in the heel, and they put one on the top of the foot. That's the more recent, and that had to, the military did not want me going overseas. They didn't feel they could provide good enough protection. As it turns out, I think they saw that the facility was pretty safe. It's got it's a compound in Uganda, and it's got a barbed wire 10-foot wall, a metal gate that encloses the house, and then at every entrance of the house, it's graded metal gates that are bigger than a cell wall in a prison. So no entry could be accessed in this compound. But an unknown showed up on the security camera, and that became their reason. And then the security cameras were damaged, and that became their reason for blocking the trip to Uganda last year.
Okay. But why are the military so into you?
I don't have answers on that. The military was involved in the embryo implant along with the Greys. I don't know how these 3 groups are coordinated. Information I got says they're not coordinated. Mm-hmm. So there's so much I don't know. I don't know as I explained, I don't know the whys. Okay. it seems to, as I said, start at time of birth.
Well, let's talk about the how it felt going off world, let's say, because you talked about having these senses. You used all your senses. It felt cold, felt
Okay,
warm.
yeah. And so when they send you to a location, if you're conscious, you're going to be lost because it's an alternate personality that usually responds in that location.
Okay.
So there's personality changes that occur with the Pleiadians to a degree. The military, I don't. They've been taking me a lot, but it's been surgical, and so there's no memory. But there is memory usually with the military. The Pleiadians. So I've been to several different planets with different groups of people or different celestials, and they've kind of introduced me to like the colony or whatever they are, and then I'll be amongst them. They usually are telepathic, and then one time it became so real, they dropped me off in a town to go to a particular house door. And there was a woman expecting me at that door. It was part of the breeding program. And so suddenly all six senses, and I'm thinking I'm in the woods, lost, 2 a.m. in the night. I'm supposed to go to some particular house. So the police end up involved wherever I was teleported to, because I told the woman to call the police. I'm lost. I didn't even know what state I was in. So she didn't want to call the police. And the whole thing I was trying to set up with her is what would happen if you wake up in your town in the middle of the night. How do you go about going to somebody's house asking for help? And so I was expecting to give her all the precautions where she doesn't come out of her house. But as it turned out, that was the house I was supposed to go to. So that was fine. And so the police ended up taking me, and I disappeared in the back of the cruiser.
But yeah, you were taken off world though, and
yeah. I went to a planet. The people were stubbier, and they seemed to have this silt about them. It had a stronger gravitational field, and I had trouble standing up. Once I was standing up, I was okay, but I had a lot of problems. It took me a while after visiting that 3 or 4 times that was the gravitational field of that planet.
Okay.
She was telepathic and seemed to telepathically communicate in English. And we had several discussions on occasions of the schools and so forth.
Okay.
And then I was dropped in a village in the mountains of, it's a major mountain. And I've gotten resources on this village. It's a Pleiadian village set up to mock our reality so they can transition. And it's in the I don't know why I can't remember the mountain range, but I heard references to it after I'd been to it.
In South America?
No, it's in the high mountains. It's not South America. It's more, the name will come to me. It's in my writing. But there was a village surrounded by 12-foot fences, barbed wire across the whole village was surrounded in wire, and there was military guards on entrance, and the car brought me up to it and said, go in there and find a date. And I really didn't know, and they were laughing. They were being a little sarcastic. So I went through the gates into the village, and first there was a place that said hotel, and it looked like a giant barn with a whole mess of military beds stacked on top of each other. And so that was where they were living. The next building said store. And basically everything was free there for them. So I'm wandering around this village, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with finding somebody. It's like walking among strangers. And I bump into this dark-skinned woman she was dark-skinned, maybe Mediterranean. But I'm sure she had nothing to do with Mediterranean, but because she had just arrived the previous day. So I bumped into her and I apologized. And then I'm wandering around again. I see her again and I decide to approach her. And then she shows me where the animals are, that they're in this giant metal corrugated barn. And she takes care of the animals. And she had just arrived. So she was showing me a calf. Then what happened gets kind of strange after that. And then I'm teleported out. I get assaulted, and then shortly after, so I have their police who didn't really know how to be police arrest this guy that tried to assault me with a hatchet. But it was interesting. My strength was abnormal. And that's the thing that seems to happen in teleportations. We have incredible physical strength. So he wasn't a real threat. I kept restraining him, moving the axe, and I had them arrest him. This mock police department did what they thought was an arrest. The woman that was with me, ended up going with her people in the disruption because she was uncomfortable not being with the people. It was a very strange, and then they teleported me out.
So they created this fake.
The Alps.
The Alps, okay.
Yeah, it's a village in the Alps, and I've heard references to it. And I believe it's a Pleiadian village. There was one man that was trying to make a visit there for a particular drug, and he was refused at the entrance. But I've heard references on this particular base in the Alps, and it's real high up.
Okay, but you never got a date then?
No, I ended up with the woman, the dark-skinned woman, and then she showed me the animals, and then she wanted to sexually interact, and then that's where the guy with the axe or the hatchet interfered.
Okay.
They had a problem with I don't know what his problem was, but anyways, he's the one I had the mock police department arrest, and they put him behind bars, but they didn't really know what they were supposed to do with him. So the whole thing was a very strange situation.
So you were beamed back?
Basically, we're taken out of our beds, or we're taken from a standing position in our room. I don't know if you got any of the pictures.
Well, there's one that seems like an energetic thing.
Yeah, that's how we move.
Okay.
That's the camera's representation of it. Actually, it's a painfully bright light.
Okay.
That's why I describe it, because I've witnessed them visiting me coming through that way. And it's a very painful light. But then I've witnessed them visiting me. One just came in as a cloud and she became a woman in a dress. So I've seen them come different ways. And it's funny because you were describing one method. There seems to be many technologies that they're able to access us and take us.
Yeah.
But plasma teleportation is with the three I'm with. Because in the filming, we found three patterns to the plasma teleportation. So we assume these are three different technologies.
Do you know what happens to the soul when you go through that process?
It doesn't seem like everything is instantaneous. Of course, you have no perception of time. So there's no sensation. Some people who are not familiar with it talk about nausea and dizziness. But it's fairly painless and fast. Yeah. and that mentally, that when that woman took me from my room to her bedroom, I'm standing in her, and she took me consciously because a spirit woke me up prior to her arrival. So I was sitting on the bed, so she wasn't planning on getting me consciously. So I see this woman forming in the bathroom, a blonde woman in a dress, and I go to approach her. Next I know, I'm in her bedroom, trying to figure out what just happened. And so that was one of the few conscious experiences in teleportation.
Okay. Whoa.
And then she sprayed me with that spray that I told you about that makes you somewhat assaultive and you lose memory. But they get their sperm that way. So supposedly she had been with me on another occasion with her previous pregnancy. I don't know what was going on with the pregnancies and the breeding projects. I don't know. You know, I just did what I was directed. Showed up in her room. She sprays me with this gas, and I don't remember anything after that. From what I understood, she returned me to my bed and tucked me in. But anyways, I was mad because she sprayed me with the gas.
So what's happening now with you? I know you got married and
yeah, and that led into a conflict with the Pleiadians. That led into a conflict with everybody, including the military.
oh.
Because the woman I married she's a United Nations official, top secret security clearance military. So everybody thinks spy. She's 26 years younger than me. So everybody is thinking she's a spy. The Pleiadians say if they find, and the Pleiadians know everything that goes on. If they see evidence, she will disappear, is what they tell me. The military is blocking all communications in all sorts of ways with computer and phone. And they're even putting messages in WhatsApp that, because when she was sending her identification information, they sent a letter telling her to send it to another email address. So the military's having a problem. So I asked the Greys, can you protect her? And the Greys put lacerations on her back to show me that they will protect her. So she's abducted out of the fort in Sudan. But I can't talk too much about this.
That's crazy.
But they put a lot of marks on her. They put a lot of surgical marks on her.
Oh no.
All three groups put surgical marks on her.
I'm so sorry.
So anyways, everybody's comfortable with her now.
Okay.
But the Greys stood by me the most with, because the Pleiadians can't undo what the Greys have. The technology is way beyond the Pleiadians. The Pleiadians aren't going to mess with the Greys. So when the Greys put protection on her, that kind of had them step away. Okay. But everybody thought she was a spy. She located the 7 implants, which didn't help them not thinking she was a spy.
How did she do that?
Well, I was in bed with her, and there's one in my back that's pretty obvious. I told her about that one. She went looking for all the other ones.
Okay.
Yeah, I removed the one in my back and they put it back in, which is really appreciated. 7 men holding me down on a table, cutting my back open with no anesthesia. They were angry because I removed it.
So have you ever seen it?
It protrudes from my back. When the doctors removed the first one, it was encapsulated in tissue. So they sent it away. I never got the sample back on that one. And then they put another one in a year later in my back.
We've talked about ghosts. Have you seen them a lot?
Yeah, I've had a lot of, in one of the abductions, this is one experience with a spirit. The personality in a series of the abductions, his name, we call him Kenneth. A woman that he often visited in my body was dying of cancer, breast cancer. And she lived in, I believe she lived in Worcester, and I forgot the name of the street because she gave all that information to me. So anyways, the sister shows up in the abduction and tells Kenneth that her sister's dying. And then Kenneth decides to have her watch me at this house. Kenneth transitions between, I really don't know how, he's possessed other people, he's spoken through mediums. Kenneth, I really, and I'm sure the government considers him a phenomenon because he locked the military agents in the car. Kenneth is telepathic, he has abilities. And I'm sure he's one reason I've been considered a threat to national security. But Kenneth is a soul, a spirit, separate of me. I don't think personalities can speak through mediums. And especially he's speaking through the medium with me there. He's identified himself as we're two souls in the same body. He also works in my body with the military. But I don't know what he's doing. I have no memory. He's a total memory wipeout.
Okay.
Missing time. That's all he is.
So you never really seen him? Is it?
I've talked to him through the mediums.
Okay.
And as a child, he was telepathically connected with me.
Okay.
The people that have seen him describe him looking like me, but not me.
Hmm.
He can teleport. He can go.
Okay.
Some of the ETs or interdimensionals know how to teleport.
Yeah.
I don't. The only thing I can do is if I have to use the bathroom and I don't like using the bathrooms in the Pleiadians facility, is I'll teleport myself home to use my bathroom. That's the only teleportation I do.
You said that you were in a place where I think there wasn't enough oxygen. You had to.
Yeah, there was. It was a 3-story military facility, I believe. I don't know what it belonged to, but I met this woman in my abductions, and we are very close friends. And she's much more telepathic and psychically able to do things than I. So she helps me a lot. She's been to the same facility. And the 3rd story, I don't know what it is, but when we're there, we're to stay in the 2nd story. And a number of times I was there wasn't enough oxygen. And there's other ETs there. And it seemed like the thermostat was up a little high. So I was looking for the thermostat. And I remember the officer confronted me, telling me I need to take some anti-anxiety medication, but I wasn't getting enough oxygen. So it was feeling like I was suffocating.
Wow. Could you describe the grays? Because we talked about the Pleiadians a bit earlier, but
yeah.
So what type of grays have you seen?
They are often referred to as the Zetas. As I said, they're from the future, but they're doing surgery on me, so they definitely have access to this present. The surgical technology I can't make sense out of. They can dismantle a body with no blood and put it back together again. So I'm spending it sometimes suspended time. They look like pretty much the standard gray you see that's posted. Their faces are usually blurred, and I think they purposely done that to me. Because also I have general issues with facial recognition in my daily life.
Okay.
I told my wife, if you expect me to recognize you in a public facility, please don't. Just come up to me and let me know it's you. But facial recognition has been a lifelong problem. Actors, 2-dimensional, no problem whatsoever. But 3-dimensional, forget it. That and a sense of direction.
Have you had the chance to meet other aliens other than the Greys and the
They've
Pleiadians?
introduced me to several. That stubby woman, I think with the long hair and powder on her, I've had both unconscious, I mean, memories I don't remember and memories I do, because she recognizes me. A lot of them recognize me, so when they recognize me, I assume they know me. She was stubby and short because of the gravitational fields, I believe, on her planet. The other one looked very much, they dropped me to a village, and it seemed to be in marshes. And no problem with the oxygen. The oxygen seemed good. They looked like us from behind, but there's distortions. I call them distortions. There were facial below the nose that was different than ours. And when I'd seen them on other occasions, everywhere I look, I'd see these deformed faces. So eventually I realized they are very friendly. And they were showing, and there was this tub that wasn't of their technology. Their technology was very primitive. The climate was very warm. It didn't feel that humid. And they had this tub. And I believe the tub was brought there by another species of celestials to control infection and death. But the tub had a filtration system in it, and everybody was put into the tub. She brought me to one, there may have been others, and she wanted me to take my clothes off and get into the tub. So I took my clothes off, got into the tub, and I was a little embarrassed taking my clothes off in front of her. And their clothes they send me with. They can put clothes on you, or they can send you without clothes, and I don't know how they put them on me. Sometimes occasionally they've had me dress at my own home and go with clothes from my home.
Have you ever been brought back with your clothes upside down or inside out?
No, but I've arrived with them that way.
Yeah.
They were introduced me to a woman who didn't know she was a contactee. And I was working with her. And she seemed to have a strong attraction to working with me. She was asking the supervisors to work with me. And there was a sensation with her I couldn't understand. So they took me to see her on several of her abductions. And one time was a class, and my underwear was on top of my jeans. And when I was sitting at the table in the class, I just appeared there. My bottom half was exposed, and I was trying to figure a way to get the jeans and the underwear over me. But nobody could see anything under the table. So then she was there, and she was answering questions of the professor or whoever was speaking. So sometimes usually the clothes are on right. When I come home, a couple of times shirts disappeared. I don't know how I guess I went with I don't know, one I put some marijuana. I was at this house, and the guy was smoking marijuana. There was a little, and I put it in the pocket. That shirt didn't come back. And then it showed up in my laundry. Disappearing items, that's another strange thing. I go to visit my friend 100 miles away with my keys. I get out of the theater, and the car keys have disappeared.
Okay.
So I have no keys to get home with. As it turned, I had a spare key, metal key. So I got home. 2 days later, the keys show up in my other car, sitting on the driver's seat. If there's things they want, they've often taken my medications to evaluate my medications. Things will disappear. Sometimes they don't come back. But I was experiencing this as a child. So permanency of where you put something was getting to be very frustrating. So then you'd go to hide it somewhere, and then you wouldn't know where you hid it or put it. So permanency of objects in place was always something that bothered me. One time my sneakers disappeared and I wanted to go for a walk. And then my sister found them where I had looked. So
Naughty.
they didn't want me going on the walk for some reason, I guess.
You've talked about celestials. To you, what are they? Who are they?
The Pleiadians and the Greys, and I, of course, experienced them as physical beings. There's many. I thought there was 12 involved with mankind on Earth, but I found it exceeded that. Of the higher frequencies, and the reptilian is a group of the lower frequencies that cause a lot of harm to their contactees. But the ones I'm with are of the higher frequencies. So when you ask that question, I'm trying to figure out what you're looking for.
Well, who are they? And
oh, okay. Well, the Pleiadians have been involved in the seeding of Earth, as they have told me. They've been trying to be protective of Earth. The Pleiadians, I believe, have control of all nuclear facilities on Earth. So this idea of a nuclear war is not going to happen. The Federation had made a decision, that there's been enough destruction of planets with the atomic nuclear, and that man on Earth isn't able to handle that responsibility. And in the 70s, they were neutralizing all the silos all over the planet. Of course, the military, I listened to accounts. Linda Moulton Howe had radio on several accounts of people and personnel in those facilities that were being shut down. And I thought it was Greys, but it seemed more like it was the Pleiadians. One seemed to feel it was a Pleiadian ship. The ships would hover over and just shut the plants down, or the missile sites down. So this idea of nuclear war, it's not going to happen.
But the Celestials, are they like angelics, or are they energetic beings?
That's another realm. I don't know. The angelic realm are shapeshifters. And I had an experience. She introduced me to her, and she shapeshifted to her current form, which was quite frightening. But as I said, what oversees is the energy coming from them, and it matching with the energy in you, and you feeling comfortable with them. And that seems to be automatic with most the celestials I've encountered. Everything interacts together, from the spiritual realms, telepathy. There's in my time travel experiences, it's kind of where I end up believing in predetermination. I go ahead 3 months. 3 months later, I experience exactly, and that's in the UFO Girl book. I experience exactly what I experienced 3 months before, what I thought was a dream, except the lucidity was incredibly real. So I go 3 months ahead to see everything come about to what occurred 3 months ahead. And a lot of decisions, a lot of changes were going on in that period. So that makes me believe that our roles are somewhat picked as we're born. But again, time is I really don't have much explanation for it. I've gone back in time in my previous life forms, and it seemed like and as the Buddhists explained to me, you are there. You're in that time. And in both going to the future and going to the past, you're watching yourself. You're not having control of the interaction. You're watching yourself interact, because when you're visiting the past, it already happened. You already made those decisions. So it's just like, and deja vu, I think, plays a role in that. And so when I went through the experience of the future, of course, it was a deja vu feeling that came with it, that I'd been here before. But all the things that had to have occurred for what occurred made me believe in predetermination.
Okay. Now, like, just to finish the interview, do you have a like perhaps another cool story to share with everyone, or like a closing statement regarding your contacts?
My contacts have been very beneficial, and as all of us, we go through traumas with them and things we come to realize. But in all, most of us with the higher frequencies feel they have much to share with us. We usually find easy contact with other contactees. So there's usually a lot of sharing of information. So when I'm speaking to people on radio or on phone or messenger in other countries about their experiences, I'm learning. And I've spoken with a woman in California who's teaching on the classes on the ship. I've spoken with people with much more awareness of what they're experiencing than I am. But I believe man, through his own greed, is bringing about the destruction of this planet. I believe it's already occurred. It's going to occur. But what I don't know, the sun keeps coming up in these premonitions. So I'm very confused. Solar blasts knocking out the grid. So whatever happens in the future, the Pleiadians do not want it to occur. It's going to occur at a massive level. My impression is they're going to work to preserve life. We may be moved. What has come to me as two other planets. One group to one planet, one group to another planet. Those self-serving will be the separate group. And then the group that serves others, which is mainly reflective of people in human services, will go to another place. And then eventually Earth will be restarted as it's been restarted before. I guess that's about all I can say.
It is. Well, it's been fun, Kenneth. Thanks for coming on.
I really appreciate the opportunity. You take care.
Yeah. So to those watching, hope you enjoyed today's interview. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So take care, everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.